first of all, gents, would you mind introducing yourselves? And if I could start with you, Luca.
Okay. So thanks for inviting me here. And so let me introduce the complexity of delivering services in a city. So Milan is a city of 1.4 million inhabitants. We are also servicing 1 million of city users through 14,000 employees into 24 different departments. And we have something like 354 processes, actually administrative processes, that translate into 619 services. Yes, we counted everything. And to deliver this complexity, we created the Citizen Experience Department that I'm leading. And the concept is trying to put the citizen in the center, also in the claim of the organization, shifting the focus from the service channels to the ultimate objective of the channel, is delivering a good experience. And we put all the key factors that, or some of the key factors that influence a good experience into this department, basically the customer operation, the digital channel, and the back office application that are on the line of business that deliver the services. And Appian is one of the platforms we are using in this area to create effective and efficient, let me say, citizen-centric services.
Awesome, thank you very much. And I've put Luca next to me to try and improve my Italian, but I'm not quite sure that's going to work. Awesome. Hugh, can we pass to yourself, sir?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. My name is Hugh Wallace. I'm the Chief Information Officer for an organisation called Research Data Scotland. My organisation exists, a relatively new organisation, kind of only up and running sort of properly since 2022. But we're all about making faster and simpler access to public sector data for vital research purposes. And in terms of our Appian adoption, it's about putting a platform in place to enable an end-to-end digital journey to enable researchers to apply for and gain access to data for their research purposes.
Thank you, Hugh. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Lloyd. I am the Automation Delivery Lead for Cambridge University Press and Assessment. I've joined them over a decade ago now, which makes me feel old, as a senior Oracle developer, actually writing the algorithms that do the GCSE grading. So I've probably done something that's impacted someone in this room, forgive me. And now, as I say, I'm a delivery lead for automation. About 4 years ago, there was a POC that went up for approval that was to look at the automation of one of our services we offer to the US students. That got approved, which was great, and that's when our relationship with Appian started. Rolling on to now, we have 10 applications in production and close to 100 RPA processes. Now, they span across the whole organization, so primarily we're assessment and academic focused, but most of our stakeholders also reside in finance, premises, HR, procurement. So to say the world of automation is interesting and challenging is probably true, but we're here today obviously to share our experiences, so I think we'll better share that well with you.
I think we'll get right down into the gnarly detail of that. David.
Right, I'm David Bates, Head of IT and Data at Social Work England. Social Work England are the newest health regulator in England. We were established, or went live on December the 2nd, 2019, so we are 5 years and 1 day old, so happy birthday to us. We were established to essentially regulate social workers and try and improve people's outcomes from interacting with social workers. We chose Appian after quite a few lengthy conversations internally in those early days. But it's our central case management system, so we use it purely for case management, for our principal practice, for registration, for all regulatory activities that centre around our case management system built in Appian.
Excellent. So the whole premise today now is I've got 4 experts here that can tell us everything about Appian better than I can. We'll get down into some of the detail and some of the gnarly areas of that as well. So Hugh, if I can start with yourself, having completed that first phase, one of the things I found from experience is that sometimes technology enables you to do things you weren't maybe expecting, or enables you to do things in a different way than you were originally planning. Have you got any of those kind of experiences to share with us? And the answer's not no, by the way.
No, I mean, I think it's really interesting to be here today because actually, it was last year at Appian Europe, we just signed the contract to work with Appian, and we kind of then were sort of going back to Scotland, back to Edinburgh to kind of dive headlong into the process of building a product. So we spent 4 or 5 months delivering a minimum viable product and really trying to kind of get the basics in place to kind of really establish a backbone, a case management backbone for our organization. So there's a real focus, and I think there's been a continued focus about getting the right tools and tech in place to serve our users, and from an internal administration perspective, really make life easier for people that have kind of languished a little bit unloved up till now. So I think the value of kind of getting in there and delivering a product, we've now had some time to work with it, and are now sort of stepping back a little bit, thinking about kind of where our next key priorities are, thinking about some of the automation that we want to put in place, what aspects of the tool set that we can get our teeth into that are really going to kind of make that faster and simpler user journey. It's really good to have kind of quite an outcome-driven statement in terms of our organizational remit, because it means we can think about all the things that really do make that efficiency saving take place.
And those next phases can be always quite tricky if you don't plan for them appropriately. And certainly as your project kind of evolves. David, in your world, can you talk us through, because you've had a little bit of experience around that?
Yeah, so as I referenced, we're 5 years old as a live regulator. 12 months prior, we were established as an organization. I was the 4th person in the organization. Choosing the product was one challenge. Obviously, when you deliver, you like to have requirements. Going back to university, they always said, find your requirements out first before you start delivery. We didn't quite have that luxury. We had no users, we had no operating procedures, we didn't have a business. So for us, we had to approach this with a very flexible and being comfortable with ambiguity. So we could build, and our first requirement was we need to build something that could flex with the organization as we grew. So since go live, we spent a lot of time challenging some of those assumptions that we made, making some changes to the model. We're also bringing on new pieces of functionality as we've identified opportunities in the organization. So 2 really good examples was around document management. So our documents are really integral to our case processes. We wanted to store those in SharePoint for digital rights management, which we did that last year. And now we're moving on to the next stage around actually integrating our online communication. So when you contact anyone regarding the case, it's not done in Outlook, it's done within Appian directly. So we've always got a record of those transactions, of conversations, so we've got a full auditable picture. But it's that being able to flex has been really beneficial for us because we didn't know what we wanted initially, which has been a really interesting challenge.
And if we kind of pivot from one extreme, both in the panel and in the project, your world started with virtually nothing and you had to kind of figure all that out. And yet, Luca, in your world, you've got so many services. How on earth do you choose where to start? And then how much of that, and I'm making a bit of an assumption here, how much of that can you reuse each time when you do the next project? Can you take that component and use it again?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, we selected Appian because of the promise to offer a versatile approach to actually create a vertical system for services that don't have an application, that don't have a business case for having a dedicated system. And we started with a phased approach from process that have a very low risk. They were no mission critical in order to have a sort of fail-safe environment where to try and improve the benefit. And we selected the first process we implemented is the service for asking a parking permit for people with disabilities. And basically, we were very fast in implementing it. So it was a green field. There was no competition of an existing system. We delivered in 3 weeks, and actually we reduced the time of service in citizen from 3 weeks down to actually 13 hours. So then we grow, and we exactly grow by focusing on having a set of reusable sub-processes that we reuse, and once we added, the next process was already benefiting from what we done previously. And we grow up pretty fast, and now we have 24 processes, and we are working on a pipeline, and we work on 8 different areas, from tax department to police department and school management. So we have several areas where we are work. And so that basically this has been the journey we run. And now we are also trying to exploit the value, not only to work where, as I said, the competition is just an office automation tool, but where we have a legacy system, and basically we couple Appian, putting on top of the legacy system, keeping into the legacy the value that is into it, that are the data, avoiding to having a data migration. And we use Appian as an orchestrator with the front-end platform that are delivering the experience and providing automation that are things that legacy typically are not good to do it. So that's the journey we are in.
It's almost like you prepped the guys from earlier in the day talking to this agility orchestration. It's amazing. But it's so good to hear that it's been done in practice, that component reuse. Another area that I'm going to pick on, particularly, Mark, your world. Sometimes we as businesses can introduce IT and it can run away with itself, whether it's something like WhatsApp, which is questionable maybe in the business area. But sometimes it can go viral. And just because you can do something in IT doesn't necessarily mean you should do it in IT. How have you managed that in your organization, kind of containing and looking after that?
So I think the simple answer is we haven't really managed it too well. In the automation space, it's actually proved a bit of a challenge, because essentially I've now got a backlog this big and a team this big.
Yeah.
You know, one's growing faster than the other, and you can guess which one that is. I think the organization as a whole has come on board with what automation can deliver, how it can work in collaboration with them, how it can enhance their processes. And I won't blow my own trumpet, but we've become a bit of a victim of our own success. You know, people have seen what we can deliver. We're starting to see that engagement from the business. They're almost coming up with a solution. They're solutionizing for us. You know, this is an Appian opportunity. Whoa, calm down. It's not quite that. So that's one challenge that we're facing. Another one, which is, it's all good. The architects on the program board, so big programs of work, are now actually aware of what Appian can do, the new features, the new functionalities, and they're putting that forward as well for these new solutions. I keep saying challenge. The problem is, at the moment, we have visibility of that too late, as in, this has been decided, this has been signed off, now deliver it. So I'm trying to now get on those program board meetings to get automation on the table. This is what Appian can do. I'd rather it be taken off then, as opposed to landing on my desk, you know, you've got 3 months to deliver this. So I think we're in a really good space, and with obviously the Gen AI and AI buzzword that's flying around, our organization is heavily looking at that. Obviously, we have to be very, very cautious. There's quite a huge ethical consideration to take into account, impacting exams and assessment. So, but seeing how that now can work with Appian, and how we can contain, you know, the AI and the Copilot to our own data sets is something I'm going to take away from this as well, because that's one of the big concerns.
Yep.
We don't want it to be released on our our full data lake in EDP. So interesting times, but like I say, so I'm really pleased with where we are, but it brings its own challenges in the sense that I need a bigger team to be able to deliver this. We're looking at more of a federated model, because people get frustrated. They come to me and you can have that next year. No, we want it now. So they're looking at hiring their own teams. So I'm trying to look at the governance around that. I want to encourage and work with them, because if we can have that kind of operating model, it makes sense to me. But I don't want mavericks out there as well, because we've experienced it. They've built something, 6 months later it lands on my desk because it's not supported anymore. So we're trying to kind of control that. But yeah, it's definitely a buzzword.
It's a challenge, right? So audience participation. This is going to be really great, because I'm going to challenge these guys with the same question in a second. In your own worlds, thinking about a process that you've worked on yourselves, maybe a workflow or something you're considering doing, hands up those of you that want to lock down what that new process or the best process should be first. Put your hands up if that would be your approach. You're going to get it all figured out before you do any technology. 1, 2, 3, 4. Wow. Okay. And of those 4 people, how many of you actually did that when you implemented it? I'm guessing 0. Absolutely 0. Amazing. Okay, so if we take that same question, David, when you did that, what did you do?
So I think, as explained earlier, we didn't have anything to document. So we kind of flew blind a little bit initially, but now
Did you get it right first time?
I want to say yes, but I'd be lying, because we've still got a team doing development work. No, it's, I think I've learned certainly over the last 6 years at Social Work England, change is inevitable.
Yeah.
You can't keep a process the same for its life cycle. There will be changes, there'll be improvements, there'll be environmental changes for us, regulatory change in determining we need to make a change to that particular process. So for me, it's being able to flex quickly to support that. I think speaking to some colleagues from other areas around the challenges they face around very, very strict lockdown systems that don't allow the flex means they have to wait 1, maybe 2 years for what is on the face of it a very simple change. So for us, the importance is making sure we build some flexibility, obviously not too much because that becomes very expensive to do, but recognizing that things will change. So don't create a process that is so locked down that to make a change, you're going to have to spend the same amount of time to implement it.
And Mark, what were your thoughts? I'm going to come all the way back through, but Mark, what's your thoughts on the same question? Define the process up front.
100%. The big caveat is there that the person that's requested it knows what the process is. And I don't mean that flippantly, I'm being honest. So we try to perform a lot of analysis. Well, we do perform a lot of analysis, but you will be amazed at how many people say, I've got this process, we want to automate it. Okay, can you just document for me? No. What do you mean that? Well, it does this. Oh, and then it does that, then it does that. So we're quite lucky within Cambridge University Press and Assessment that the team actually has analysts. So we're all kind of Lean Six Sigma, yellow, green, and black belts. So we actually go in and we actually start leaning the process. So we'll work with the customer directly. They don't necessarily like it all the time to tell them or challenge why they're doing their process. But we've learned from the first automation that we did that do not just automate it straight away, because it's been done like this for so long. We're an old organization, so this has always been done this way, so it must be right. No. So I would definitely recommend talk to the team, get in there to the people that actually do it. Don't take for granted what they've said when they've initially written it down. Sit with them and go through the process, because there'll be a bit when they go off to another application or send an email which they haven't logged. So
I always think, certainly from my own experience, when you're doing something like that, if they've come to you and they've got it wrong, they almost get like a little tally against their name. So next time they come to you, they go to the bottom of the list instantly. Maybe. If
I said yes, I'd probably get in trouble for that. No, because if I'm honest, for me, this is bigger than my team. This is empowering the organisation to embrace its capability. Because if they're on board, ultimately it makes us more successful.
Yep.
So that would maybe a cheesy answer, but it's actually true. It doesn't work otherwise. You need people to be engaged and kind of ready to commit to this, and they understand the little nuances. It isn't just a process as such, automating it is the wider process that they're part of.
Agree. Hugh, it's all easy in your world, right? Surely, it's all data.
Yes, it's a walk in the park. I mean, I think probably echoing points that David and Mark have already made. Preparation is vital, but flexibility is absolutely key when the rubber hits the road, when you actually start moving forward. My background, I was in Scottish government before I joined Research Data Scotland, and a lot of the good service delivery is focused on something called the Scottish approach to service design. So kind of service design principles are really kind of built into the way that I do things, and the team that we've recruited in Research Data Scotland are very much versed in that as well. So we are focused on the end users kind of first and foremost. So the understanding of user needs, the drilling into the kind of where the pain points are, to give you a sense of kind of what was happening before. I mean, my service exists in quite a fragmented landscape, different public sector organisations. So that's government, it's the NHS, it's other bits and pieces of the public sector. So you've got lots and lots of different processes in place. You've got different legislation in place. You've got people who operate their business in very different ways, and that had created a lot of manual processes. It's created a lot of kind of inefficiencies. There's a lot of legacy technology kind of sitting in there as well. So the journey before we started work on the Appian product was really, really vital in terms of that preparation, as I say, of really kind of having that holistic understanding of what sort of service we needed to put in place, a clear understanding what the outcomes that we wanted to achieve. But when it actually gets into sort of build mode, being able to be flexible and prioritize the things, that as we put things in place, as we did further usability testing, understanding where things need to change along the way. So it's been a really interesting process, because I think certainly the first time that I've had the opportunity to kind of start something right from the start, I've always kind of been dropped into the middle of services. So it's kind of given a nice place to actually think, let's try and do this well in stage management in the way that it needs to.
It's always seeking that perfection. It's always within realms of whether you get to it or not. And Luca, in your world, your world's so dramatically different because you've got so many services. So it's almost that different challenge of how do I choose which service to do first, because you've got so many in the demand against it. But then I guess the return on that also influences that area as well.
Yep.
So subtly different question, but similar. How does that work for you?
Yeah. And actually, I think that, as they already said, I think we need to, there was my former boss always said that we need to avoid to digitalize the inefficiencies, actually transforming existing inefficiency into digital inefficiency. So there's no value on that. And a couple of examples coming to your question. Talking of a good one was exactly the first and probably one of the elements of the success that we did it right at the first tentative. Because actually, together with the line of business, absolutely, that's a key. They must be into the teams. We changed also the regulatory framework where the service was executed. So we were able to get rid of some inefficiency. For example, the payment of the shipping cost for delivering the parking permit to the citizen. So streamlining then the service in a more liquid way. So we were able to offer a complete digital 24/7 services and achieving the result I was mentioning before. But we have also bad examples. The one is the demolition process. So imagine
Sounds like a film.
Yeah, demolition, because if you need to build, sometimes you need to also destroy what is there and is not needed anymore. So we talk about something like 50, 100 instances per year in a city like Milan, so pretty small number. Actually, the particular case outnumber the standard one. And again, we always been doing like that. It's our enemy, and the second one, but we are different. So the resistance to change was a big problem that actually we have implemented already since 1 year in the testing phase. This process that we actually we were not able to actually launch it in production. There's another factor that I think it's a key element when you have an effective digitalization of services, is trying to put the citizen, the end user, into the process as an active user. So this is always a good way of thinking, first of all, because actually you don't need to then have the data entry in the back office. So that's pretty easy. He do the work for us. And on the other part, we provide a better control and a better predictability from what's going on into the back office process. Also providing feedback on how the status is going on for each instance. So that's another key element.
Awesome, thank you. Right, so we're cracking through time. We're doing all right, just about, but I'm going to come to the audience again. Let's see if we can catch them out this time. One of the challenges we often all face when we're doing new IT or we're rolling that out is sometimes that human element, that human inertia that we kind of resistance to change, or I've always done it this way, or whatever the case may be. How many in the audience have hit that in either something you're working with a customer? God, you're all too easy. Either that or the coffee's not taking effect. Yeah, we've got a couple of hands. Awesome, okay. And of those people, how many of you managed to fix it? Anybody want to give us a commentary on how you fixed it? How did you fix it? You'll come back to me, all right. I was actually thinking on the questions on the app, give us suggestions of what the boy band should be called. And if we all jiggle our lanyards at the same time, maybe we could do a Christmas song as well at the same time.
Demolition process.
Like a process. It could be a great one, couldn't it? See where we go with that. Mark, particularly in your world, that kind of inertia around how we get people on board, how we go on that journey. What's your tips and tricks for how you would suggest?
So we've faced exactly what you just said, but we've also faced the kind of situation where people are scared of automation because I'm going to lose my job. And, I joke about it, but that's actually a genuine concern. So we've kind of learned pretty soon on, actually, that we need to talk to the people that this is impacting directly. Normally, we'd have the team leads or the managers approach us and say, we've got these pain points, we're going to save this much money. And that's great to get the opportunities in, but
is it the real?
So we soon worked out that workshops, sit with the team, get them on board with what automation can do for them, so it can, they can work in harmony. This isn't about replacing you. This is so, Peter, you can now free up your time to go and focus on, much more interesting tasks. So start those conversations. We had a lot. Like I say, evangelism sessions, I like that word. So general self-promotion of the team, what we can do. Yep. But the targeted sessions are where it's actually at. Go and sit on the ground and actually understand where their pain points are. Not the manager's pain point, because that will be a high-level view, where actually their day-to-day life can be impacted. And they soon realize that it's never going to fully replace what they do. It will just enhance what they do and make them more efficient. And then they'll be able to get on to those more exciting tasks.
It can be really tricky taking people on that journey with you, but I think it's so important to take them on the journey rather than do it too. Otherwise, it catches you out.
100%. This is not you cannot force this. That's what I'm saying. So
just get the resentment.
To suddenly go in and say, right, we're automating this process and that process, just wouldn't work. Well, it would work. You'd be able to automate it, but suddenly you'd have no team and morale would be really low. So like I say, that is very, very key. in the organization, we have annual data and digital days, which is like a place where we can also showcase this. So if we can't actually reach teams directly, they can come to us then, and we can go through kind of examples of what we've done, how we can help them. So that's kind of a good thing that we do.
And is that well attended? Do you get some interesting feedback?
Yeah, obviously, always interesting feedback. The best one, actually, this is for you guys. Last year, the Appian swag was amazing.
Was it?
so that's a positive. But we get all reaches from the organisation. So we actually got, last year, we got actually premises approached us, and we'd never deal with premises apart from lunch and coffees, with a new solution. Can you help us with a one-stop portal to help car booking spaces, desk booking, meal, those sort of things. So it does open up the doors, definitely, yeah.
I think our marketing folk have tuned in that the swag is really the thing. It's always a challenge, that one. Question for the audience, again, desperately trying to get you guys involved. How many of you find it really easy to do the justification around a business IT change? Figuring out what needs to go into that document? Who's going to willingly put the hand up to that? 0. Amazing. Okay. So thinking about that internally, each of you probably had your own different challenges around that internal justification, bar maybe one to a point, because maybe it was already there and it wasn't your choice. But Mark, can we start with you first, thinking about that justification, and particularly how you measure the returns? Because that's, what are you going to measure, and then how do you show that and demonstrate that?
Yeah. So I'm obviously in that latter category whereby Appian already existed, so we'd gone through the due diligence and the funding kind of. But for my sins and pain, the automation team was run as a project for 3 years. So every 6 months, I had to go back and get additional funding to continue, which meant every process that we looked at had to go through a stringent ROI process. Now, that's quite easy if you've got a really simple process that clearly stops Mark from doing this for 10 hours a week. That's very easy to say, it's going to save you this much time and this much money based on your salary, and the robot costs this much. It gets more difficult when you build bigger end-to-end processes, and we had to talk to finance, our business partner in finance, because there's benefits like time back to the business. So that free time that you've got, how do you measure that? What's that worth? What else are you working on? Competitor advantage, these non-financial benefits. We're an extremely regulated organization, so avoiding regulatory fines is a big benefit. So, as soon as we get into digitizing and automating processes, accuracy is there, auditability is there. So we build that safe, secure environment. But I would say it's trying to justify that cost element, that financial saving back to the business, which is very difficult. And it probably took us 2 years of keep on going back to finance and having these meetings to actually say we need to take into account the bigger holistic picture. People's well-being needs to be taken into account as well. This is not just about performance and actual fiscal saving. It's about actually freeing up that time to actually then make people, you can have time to go and have a coffee. It sounds silly. Have a meeting, have another conversation, focus on more work. But I'm glad to say we've moved away from the project now. We're kind of an in-house team, but we are still pretty strict with what we do. Everybody has to fill in an initial template, basic content. How many times does this process happen? Is it part of a wider process? Who does it, for how long, salaries involved. So we always have that initial analysis just to give us that high-level score, because there's still a cost associated to it.
And if you got them to such a level of conviction now, they don't come back to you every 6 months, or is it still?
I don't go at all anymore.
Do you not?
No, that's good, because we've kind of in-house the capability now. It was always run as a managed service, so hence why the funding was there. So over the last year, we've secured budget to build an internal team. So I'm not scrutinized as much. I still have to obviously deliver monthly, quarterly reports to stakeholders, but that's just very high level, and I'm not challenged as much as I used to be.
I suspect there's a fair few people in the audience that are going to beat the path to your door going, what's that secret source of how I measure justification? But and Luca, in your world, because you've got so many of those services, were you able to use maybe that component reuse aspect? Would that help in your justification? Is that what you've done?
Yes, absolutely. And then consider the exponential benefits of having of reusing something that is already there, because Once you've done it, for the second process, you have maybe one component to be reused. Then for the third one, you have two. And so there's a sort of exponential time to market where we are able to build up with combining these Lego blocks, okay, and providing the process. Then another key element is also the benefit of standardization, because of course, if the process, especially for the customer perspective, is always proceeding in a predictable way, there's no surprises. Actually, there is more a smooth experience that is providing, so are less inquiries, for less contacts on our customer care. So that's good for us. Coming to the benefit, basically, at the end, we measure the productivity gain we are producing internally with basically the zero backlog kind of target, where we entering and we delivering the process. Actually, one of the benefits we measure if we are able to transform the existing backlog into something like zero, managing the instance in a real time. And from the outside, so from the customer perspective, the productivity gain is about the times to actually fulfillment, the request that we are measuring. Plus, at the end, the ultimate way to measure the benefit is actually running surveys. So we run touch point experience surveys on asking customer, do you suggest this service to a friend or colleague? We measure the NPS, and more than the absolute number, looking to the dynamics on how this customer perception evolve over time, provide us guidance on how we are doing and to continue to get further benefit. And coming to a final element is that we injected into the teams and into the organization a sort of motto that is doing more with less, that is the way in which it makes the ultimate sense of doing innovation, doing automation, and achieving the effectiveness of the services, because then this is directly translated in less cost of running the services. So a customer that is happy, basically they are not calling us, so we spend less, and so we can reinvest in having a sort of virtuous cycle. So this is, I think, especially in government, is a key element to align the organization thinking this way, trying everybody achieving the goal of doing more with less.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you. I'm thinking about that NPS, that Net Promoter Score, and it's probably a little bit unusual in public sector to be thinking of it that way, but it makes a lot of good sense, right? So if we think about that, Hugh, coming to your world, if we look at the citizens a bit more and that experience, something that's really important for the value that your organisation does is the societal benefit. So not only in just the cost of delivery and lower taxpayers, ideally lower tax and council bills, etc., but in your world, how is that manifested? What's the societal return of doing some of the projects you're working on?
I mean, I think it's interesting, the answers there and the questions, because ROI is, can be very difficult in the public sector. Is often it's a complex array of different factors that need to be taken into account. Our organisation exists to facilitate research in the public good, and ultimately that's about bringing benefits to Scottish society, to the people of Scotland. Without access to that data, then that research simply can't happen. We're working in terms of sort of anecdotal and real evidence of, it taking up to 6 years for a researcher applying to get access to data, and then eventually, via several different life changes, getting access. And that means, research not getting done, drug discoveries not getting made, benefits never being realized. There's almost like an anti-measure in there. If you don't work to improve, if you don't work to transform that access space, then all the other good things or all the other positive things are going to struggle to happen. So, I mean, words, slightly jargony words like efficiency get tossed about an awful lot, but I think we can clearly show that there are massive inefficiencies and gaps in the process at the moment, and therefore kind of tying that back to societal good as being a driver for change is a really important thing.
Really good, thank you. I've got a feeling that the English government's trying to do something very similar to what you guys have done in Scotland, right? So maybe you could teach them a trick or two.
I would say the Welsh are well ahead of the game in terms of everybody. Yeah, so
awesome, thank you. And if I can't move to yourself, David, societal benefit in your world is just part of your lifeblood, right? You can't exist unless you were doing that. How has that changed your world?
So I think look at Social Work England's overall objectives and strategies to be an effective regulator, and I look at what does that mean. And we have multiple customers to our services. Obviously, our internal customers are very important. What we look externally and look at the social workers we regulate. So historically, some regulators have had challenges with interacting in an efficient way. Social workers do a fantastic role, a fantastic job. They work in some really difficult conditions. The last thing they want is a digital service that makes it more difficult for them. So we spend a lot of time looking at the usability, looking at how our social workers will interact with our services across their life cycle to ensure we're not getting in the way. And I think that's really important to us to support that. Obviously, there's other things we're trying to do. We start looking at the end user need, looking at the journey that they're going through. Because if we're taking half an hour away from a social worker being able to practice, that's having an impact on an individual, and that's obviously, we would never want that. So we're really looking at that from a sort of return on investment, looking at trying to speed up the interactions with it. So when we do, social workers do renewals on a yearly basis, or we call their CPD, we're trying to make it as simple and as effective as possible. That has meant we focus more on the external than the internal, and we've got a lot of work and challenges internally that we want to spend time on. But I think if we can, like the swan, we can have the legs going crazy but looking serene on the surface. So for the social workers, I hope it's a serene, nice plain sailing organisation with a few challenges underneath. But yeah, that's our next round of improvements.
Makes sense. Okay, thank you. I know we're nearly at time. I've got one last thing for you, if you've got your phones around. What we're looking to do, particularly in the public sector space, is set up a customer advisory council. At the moment, what we're looking for is expressions of interest, particularly in the pub sec space. If that's something that you want to get involved with, want to learn more, want to interact with a fantastic panel like we have today, clearly Appian will be at the background of that, just looking after it and helping sponsor it. But at the end of the day, it's for the public sector as a whole to get the value out of. And I know you wanted to say a few words on that.
Yeah, I think for me, just listening to the stories and the conversation today, there's a wealth of knowledge that we don't get a chance to tap into. I think having a forum where we can speak openly about what's positive, what's good, but also what sometimes doesn't work, and that may not be comfortable for yourself, Peter, but I think there's conversations I'm really keen to have, because I know things that we're doing, people have done before, and probably things that we've done, people may want to do in the future. So I think having that opportunity to speak and to converse, and happy to speak now, after, or in a further session, but I think it's going to be really powerful to help me understand and our organisation grow in its use of Appian, and to make sure we deliver excellent services to our customers.
Awesome, thank you very much. So all that remains for me to do is to thank Luca, Hugh, Mark, David. Thank you so much for your time, really value it. Can we give them a round of applause, please?